A simple African woman laughed, walking out of the dealership. The next day, her Arab executive husband's Rolls-Royce arrived. She never expected much from life. Raised in a modest village, with dreams far too big for her surroundings, she learned early to laugh at disappointments. So when she walked out of that luxury car dealership and saw the salespeople smirking behind her back, she just smiled and whispered, "Maybe someday." What she didn't know was that her husband, a powerful, reserved Arab executive, had heard everything. And the next morning, when a white Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up in front of their house, she couldn't believe what was happening. But what truly shocked her was what he said when he handed her the keys. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. It helps us bring more emotional and inspiring stories just like this one straight to your heart. Now, get ready to witness a story of love, power, humility, and the quiet strength of a woman who thought she had nothing, until she realized she had everything that mattered. The air inside the luxury dealership was sharp, with the scent of new leather and quiet judgment. Amina walked slowly between the gleaming rows of Bentleys and Aston Martins, her modest heels clicking on the polished tile. Her beige scarf fluttered slightly from the cold burst of air conditioning. She wasn't here to buy. Not really. Just looking. That's what she told the man at the front desk when she walked in. And he hadn't bothered to hide the way he looked her up and down. Her long, simple dress, no jewelry, no designer bag. "Of course, ma'am," he said with a tight smile. "Feel free to browse." They always said that word like it meant don't touch. Still, Amina smiled politely and wandered further in, not letting the discomfort stop her. She loved cars. Always had. Even as a girl in Dakar, she would stop on the sidewalks to watch the Mercedes pass, whispering the names of the models like prayers. G-Class, E-Class, S-Class. Now, married to one of the most powerful men in the Gulf, you'd think she'd be used to the luxury. But she wasn't. Not really. Tariq gave her everything, yes, but she never asked for much. She still washed her own scarves by hand, still made tea like her mother taught her, still cooked rice the long, slow way. As she walked past a sleek, silver Rolls-Royce, she let out a quiet, genuine laugh. Not because she didn't appreciate it, but because she imagined herself behind the wheel of something that cost more than the hospital she was born in. A laugh of disbelief, of joy somehow, of dreams that still felt far away even when you lived in a palace. Behind her, two salesmen by the coffee machine exchanged a look. One of them muttered, "Window shopper." Amina heard it. She paused for a moment, her fingers trailing the soft curve of the hood ornament. Then she turned, smiled at them, and nodded once. "Thank you," she said, her accent gentle, warm. "You've been very kind." And then she left, walking back out into the sun, her heart lighter than they could ever understand. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was who she was married to. That morning, Tariq al-Mansur had left before dawn in his usual way, quiet, unreadable, always dressed in impeccable gray. CEO of one of the largest logistics firms in the Middle East. He rarely showed emotion, and when he did, it was behind closed doors. But he loved Amina. He loved her in the quiet way that powerful men do, not with flowers or long speeches, but with silence, protection, and watching her when she wasn't looking. She hadn't told him about the dealership visit. She didn't think it mattered. But one of his security drivers had seen her, had watched her step out of a cab, walk into that showroom, and exit 15 minutes later, laughing to herself. And later that night, as they sat in their massive dining room in Abu Dhabi, with gold-trimmed ceilings and 12 empty chairs, Tariq studied her over dinner. She was talking about a new children's hospital she wanted to support in Senegal. She didn't mention the cars, not once, but he noticed the way her fingers toyed with the napkin, like something was still on her mind. He didn't say anything. He just nodded, listening. The next morning, as the golden sun rose over the edge of the city, a white Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to their front gate, carried gently on the back of a private flatbed truck. Amina was in the garden, pruning her lemon trees. She looked up as the engine shut off. Her breath caught. At first, she didn't understand. Then she saw him, Tariq, standing at the edge of the path, hands in his pockets, watching her with that unreadable gaze. She walked over, wiping soil from her fingers. "Is someone visiting?" He shook his head. "No," he said simply. "It's yours." She blinked. "Mine? I heard you laughing yesterday." Her heart stilled. He continued softly now, stepping closer. "I never want you to laugh like that and feel small." Her lips parted. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh again. "I was just looking," she whispered. "So was I," he replied. "At you." The white Rolls-Royce gleamed in the courtyard like something out of a dream. Its chrome details shimmered in the sun, and its custom cream leather interior reflected the kind of quiet wealth that didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. Amina stood motionless, hands slightly trembling, unsure whether to step closer or retreat. Tariq remained beside her, his hands in his pockets, his gaze distant. He was dressed in his usual tailored navy thobe, clean-shaven, calm. But beneath his composed exterior was something else, something that flickered just behind the eyes. A need to understand her, to reach her in his own way. She finally broke the silence. "Tariq, why did you do this?" He turned to her slowly, his voice as smooth as the car's polished hood. "Because yesterday you laughed like you didn't believe you belonged there." She hesitated. "It was just a joke. I wasn't sad." "I know. he said. But I was. That surprised her. He walked toward the car, placed his hand gently on the Spirit of Ecstasy emblem, then glanced back at her. I've given you houses, staff, jewelry, and you've accepted everything with grace. But you've never asked for anything. Ever. She looked down, suddenly aware of how out of place she felt even in her own driveway. Because I didn't marry you for those things, she said softly. I married you because you saw me. He smiled faintly. And I still do. A long silence passed between them. The garden swayed gently in the warm breeze. In the distance, the call to prayer echoed from a nearby mosque. Calm, grounded, eternal. Amina stepped forward and finally reached out, her hand resting on the car's door handle. She didn't open it. Not yet. I'm not like the women in your world, she said. I know. They come from old money, prestigious families, universities in London and Paris. Tariq tilted his head. And you think I married them? She gave a small smile. No, but I sometimes wonder what people say. I don't care what people say, he replied. I care what you feel. That stopped her. She looked up at him, really looked. Not the quiet, unreadable executive who dominated boardrooms and reshaped trade routes, but the man she first met in a dusty village clinic. The man who knelt beside her when her nephew was sick, who offered her water before introducing himself. The man who loved her without needing to explain it. Tariq took a step closer, lowering his voice. I built a billion-dollar company from nothing. I negotiated deals with kings. But do you know the one thing I still don't know how to do? She shook her head. Make you ask for something without guilt. Her eyes welled with tears, not because of the car, but because of the truth in his voice. I don't need this, she whispered. This car. It doesn't make me happy. I know, he said. But maybe it makes the girl who stopped outside dealerships in Dakar feel like she finally belongs inside. Amina wiped her cheek gently, laughing through the tears. You remember that story? I remember everything you say when you think I'm not listening. For a while, they stood in silence, the distance between them softening. Then slowly, Amina opened the car door. The scent of fresh leather, vanilla, and jasmine rose to meet her. She ran her fingers along the dashboard, the stitching precise, handmade. A small envelope lay on the seat. She picked it up and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note in Arabic. For the woman who taught me that the most valuable thing I could ever own is humility. A sob caught in her throat. She turned around, and he was already walking away, giving her space. She called after him. Tariq. He stopped, but didn't turn. She stepped forward. Next time, she said softly, Maybe just come with me to the dealership." He finally smiled. "And ruin the surprise?" "No," she said. "Share it." The grand hall of the Al-Mansour Foundation shimmered like a jewel box under the weight of chandeliers and the perfume of old wealth. It was their annual gala, the one night a year when princes, CEOs, diplomats, and discreet royalty all gathered under one roof to toast their own influence. Amina stepped out of the car with grace, her gold gown flowing around her like liquid light. It was the first time she'd worn something chosen by a private stylist. Tariq had insisted. "You represent us both," he had said earlier that evening, buttoning his cufflinks. "And you deserve to shine." She'd smiled, uncertain but touched. Now, walking beside him into a room filled with eyes trained to measure everything. Posture, fabric, accent. She felt those same doubts resurface like a tide. They didn't ask where she came from. Not allowed. They didn't need to. The questions floated in their glances. Who is she? Why her? Why not someone more like us? Tariq, as always, remained unreadable. He walked with quiet authority, nodding to sheikhs and shareholders as if they were distant cousins. His grip on Amina's hand was warm and steady, grounding her, but she could feel the tension in her own shoulders as whispers passed behind gold-rimmed flutes of champagne. They reached their table near the front, reserved with his name in elegant Arabic calligraphy. Mr. and Mrs. Tariq Al-Mansour. She tried to breathe through the discomfort, focusing on the speeches, the auction for charity, the soft clinking of silver cutlery. But the comments eventually found their way closer. "She's very quiet," one woman said behind her. "Maybe she doesn't speak Arabic," another whispered. A chuckle followed. "Or maybe she just doesn't belong." Amina lowered her eyes to her plate. The shrimp sat untouched. Tariq must have felt the shift in her posture. He leaned closer, whispering in her ear. "You want to leave?" "No," she said, forcing a small smile. "I'm fine." He studied her a moment longer, then stood and gently tapped his spoon against his glass. All eyes turned to him. He didn't speak from the stage. He didn't need one. His voice, calm and rich, carried across the room without effort. "I'd like to say something." The chatter quieted. Even the waiters froze. "My wife," he began, placing a hand on Amina's shoulder, "comes from a place where children walk 2 miles for clean water, where meals are shared with hands and prayers, where dreams aren't built on money, but on dignity." Amina looked up at him, eyes wide. She didn't grow up with servants, or bodyguards, or yachts. She grew up with courage, kindness, and more grace than anyone in this room dares to understand. The room was stone silent. "She is not a symbol of status. She is the reason I remember who I am when I'm surrounded by people who forget." A few gasps rippled through the hall, some uncomfortable shifting in chairs. Tariq paused, then added, "You may not understand her. That's all right. She wasn't made to fit in. She was made to stand beside me." He raised his glass. "To the woman I married, not because she completes my image, but because she completes me." For a long beat, no one moved. Then slowly, reluctantly, the room erupted into polite applause. Some stood. Others clapped quietly out of obligation. But Amina didn't hear any of it. She was staring up at Tariq, heart pounding, lips parted. When he sat back down beside her, she whispered, "Why would you do that?" "Because you needed to hear it," he said. "Not them." Her fingers found his, and for the first time that evening, her shoulders relaxed. She didn't belong to their world, but she belonged to his. The next morning, Tariq's private elevator opened to the 42nd floor of the Al Mansour Global Headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling glass wrapped around the boardroom like a crown, giving an uninterrupted view of the Abu Dhabi skyline. The city pulsed below with ambition, but inside the air was colder than steel. 12 men waited. Some wore tailored suits, others crisp dish-dashers and designer cufflinks. These were not friends. These were investors, shareholders, power brokers. And they had called this emergency meeting without Tariq's permission, a fact that already made his blood simmer. As he stepped in, silence fell. He didn't bother sitting. "Say what you came to say," he said. The oldest among them, Sheikh Omar, a man who had known Tariq's late father, cleared his throat. "With respect, Tariq, your personal life has become a public conversation." Tariq remained still. "The gala," another added. "Your speech was—" He hesitated. "Emotional, unorthodox, and now everyone is talking." "Let them talk," Tariq said calmly. "She's not from our world," said a third. "She doesn't come from a recognized family, no business lineage, no academic pedigree. The board is concerned." Tariq stepped forward slowly, his tone deadly quiet. "Concerned that I married a woman with dignity instead of a last name." No one answered. He continued, "I have doubled our global holdings in 6 years, opened markets across 3 continents, increased returns by 42% last quarter alone. And you're here to talk about my wife?" One man leaned forward, younger, ambitious. "Clients notice things, Tariq, and you're building a legacy. You need someone who can play the part." The words stung more than they should have. Tariq clenched his jaw. "And what part is that?" "The part that hosts state dinners, that speaks 10 languages, that doesn't make the guests feel—" He paused. "Uncomfortable." Tariq stared at him long enough that the man finally looked away. Then he walked to the window and looked out over the city. His city. He remembered the early days. sleeping on a cot in the back of a rented office, writing proposals at midnight, making cold calls no one returned. He hadn't come from a polished dynasty. He built everything from the ground up, not for approval, but for impact. And Amina reminded him why. He turned back. "You've all made your point," he said. "Now hear mine." The room tensed. "She doesn't play a part. She doesn't have to, because she is real. And that, gentlemen, is something money can't fabricate." He let the words settle. "If any of you feel your positions are threatened by the woman I love, the door is behind you. Leave your shares on the table." Silence. Nobody moved. "I didn't think so." He adjusted his cuff and walked toward the exit. Just before he opened the door, he added, "Next time you question my judgment, remember who made you rich." And then he was gone. Back in his office, Tariq stood at the window, loosening his collar. The anger didn't leave. It lingered, not just at the board, but at himself. Because part of him knew they were right about one thing. Not everyone would accept Amina. She would face more of this, more whispers, more polite smiles hiding quiet scorn. And he couldn't shield her from all of it. He wanted to believe love was enough. But was it? That night, at home, Amina noticed the weight in his silence. He didn't bring work to the dinner table, not tonight. He barely touched his food, just picked at the rice, lost in thought. "Did something happen today?" she finally asked. He looked up slowly, eyes tired. "Yes." She reached across the table and placed her hand on his. "I can handle it," she said. "Whatever they say. I'm stronger than you think." He didn't speak, but his grip tightened gently around her fingers. "I just want you to be happy," he whispered. She smiled, soft and sure. "Then stop trying to protect me from your world, and let me walk into it with you." And in that moment, something shifted. Not in the world outside, but in him. The call came just after noon. Tariq was in his office reviewing a logistics expansion in northern Africa when his personal assistant knocked, not the usual soft tap, but a hesitant, deliberate knock that said, "This isn't business as usual." "Sir," she said, stepping in carefully, holding a single envelope. "This arrived from a reporter at Al Ria Weekly. He said you'd want to see it before tomorrow." Tariq frowned. He rarely engaged with the press. Most stories about him were carefully filtered or buried by his legal team. But there was something strange about the plain brown envelope. He took it, closed the door. Inside was a printed draft of an article set to publish the next morning. The headline made his blood run cold. "The Untold Story of Amina Diouf, From Maid to Millionaire's Wife." He read in silence, jaw tightening with every paragraph. It described her early life in Senegal, much of it true, the poverty, her work cleaning homes in Dhaka. But then it veered into poison, twisting facts, painting her as a social climber who had strategically positioned herself to marry into wealth. It mentioned a name he didn't recognize, Imani So, a woman claiming to be a relative, one who alleged that Amina had abandoned family obligations and even a younger brother she left behind to struggle while she chased fortune in the Emirates. Tariq's hands trembled slightly. He knew Amina's humility. He knew her strength. But he also knew she carried a silence about her past that he had never pushed too hard against. And now, the world was about to turn that silence into scandal. He folded the paper, set it aside, and stared out the window. By evening, he was home early. Amina was in the courtyard, watering the lemon trees. She turned as he approached, instantly sensing the tension in his walk. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't speak, just handed her the article. She read it in silence, lips tightening as her eyes scanned the lines. When she reached the bottom, she exhaled softly and lowered the page. "I knew this would come eventually," she said. Tariq's voice was low. "Is any of it true?" "Yes," she said calmly. "Some of it." He waited. "I was a maid," she continued, "in 3 homes. I cleaned, I served, I survived. I never hid that. And I do have a half-brother. Imani is complicated. She resented that I left. She never wanted to come with me. She never wrote to me. Not once. But now that I've built something, she wants to rewrite the story." Tariq's jaw flexed. "She says you left him behind." "I sent money for years," Amina said. "For school, for medicine. I offered to bring them here, but Imani refused. She said she didn't want my Arab handouts, and I didn't force her." Her voice didn't shake, not once. "I did everything I could, Tariq, but I refused to let their bitterness define me." He stared at her for a long time, unsure of what he felt. Then, finally, he asked, "Why didn't you tell me about them before?" She sighed, stepping closer. "Because I wanted something with you that wasn't built on pity. I didn't want you to see me as someone who needed rescuing." He looked down at her hands, still stained slightly from the garden, then into her eyes. "I don't care about the article," he said. "I care about how you feel." She smiled, though her eyes shimmered. "I feel like I've fought my whole life to escape being someone's shame." Tariq reached up and brushed a curl from her face. "You're not my shame." She nodded. "But your board, your reputation." "Let them come," he said. "Let the world see what they want. I see you." She rested her forehead against his. "Then that's enough." But both of them knew. It wouldn't end there. By dawn, the article would be everywhere, and their love, real, fierce, and tested, was about to stand trial in the court of public opinion. The story went viral overnight. Social media exploded. News outlets across the Gulf ran with the headline, twisting it further. Housemaid to high society. The secret past of Mrs. Al-Mansour. In the boardrooms, whispers turned to closed-door meetings. In the lobbies of five-star hotels, the wives of foreign dignitaries passed judgment behind pursed lips and diamond smiles. And in coffee shops across Dakar, the name Amina Diouf returned to mouths that hadn't spoken it in years, some with pride, others with spite. Tariq's PR team called before sunrise. "We can issue a statement denying the accusations," one advisor said. "Or say it's a mischaracterization." "No," Tariq interrupted. "We tell the truth." The room went quiet. "But the truth makes her vulnerable," another added. "Once they taste blood, they won't stop." Tariq glanced out the window, where Amina stood barefoot on the stone veranda, pouring tea into two delicate cups, as calm as ever. "She's not afraid," he said. "Why should I be?" Later that morning, a sleek black car pulled up outside the Abu Dhabi Broadcasting Center. Amina stepped out alone, wearing a traditional African bubu embroidered with golden thread. No makeup, no jewels, just her presence, poised and radiant. She had requested the interview herself. Live, unfiltered, unscripted. Inside the studio, the anchor, a polished man in a navy blazer, cleared his throat nervously as cameras rolled. "Mrs. Al-Mansour," he began, "you've been the subject of intense media attention this week. Many viewers are wondering, why speak now?" Amina smiled softly. "Because when others speak for you, they often get the story wrong." The host nodded. "You were a domestic worker?" "I was," she said without hesitation. "I cleaned homes. I washed floors. I saved every coin. And I never felt ashamed of it." "What about the claims from your relative in Senegal?" "She is part of my story, yes," Amina said gently, "but not the author of it." The audience watching from across the country and far beyond sat riveted. "My mother died when I was 15, she continued. "I raised my half-brother as best I could. I sent money every month, even after I came to the Emirates. I tried to bring him here. They refused. And now that I've married a man of power, the story changes. Not because of truth, but because of resentment." The anchor leaned in. "Some say you married Tariq al-Mansour for wealth. That it was a calculated decision." She looked directly into the camera now. "I married him," she said, voice steady, "because he saw me when no one else did. Not as a servant, not as a strategy, as a woman with dreams, as a woman with worth." In the control room, the producer gestured wildly to keep the feed going. Ratings were climbing by the second. "I do not need to defend my marriage," Amina added. "But I will defend the dignity of every girl who was ever told she was too poor, too plain, or too unworthy to matter." Back at Al-Mansour headquarters, Tariq watched from his office, the sound low, his heart beating like war drums. He'd seen her strength before, in private, in silence, but never like this. She was no longer hiding behind him. She was standing beside him, and the world was listening. By nightfall, something extraordinary had happened. A movement began online. Her story, her terms. Messages poured in from women across Africa, the Middle East, Europe. Women who had once been invisible, now feeling seen. Celebrities reposted the interview. Activists quoted her words. Universities requested to host her for lectures. But more importantly, the board members who once whispered about image now fell silent. The next morning, Tariq walked into the kitchen to find her sipping tea at the window, calm as ever. "You started a revolution," he said. She smiled. "No, I just refuse to be erased." He walked over and kissed the top of her head. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For saving my name, when I should have been protecting yours." She took his hand gently. We protected each other. That night, for the first time in weeks, the house felt light again. Amina served dinner herself. Jollof rice and roasted lamb, just the way Tariq liked it. No staff, no distractions, just the two of them. Between bites, he said softly, "They're offering you a keynote in Dubai." She blinked. "Me?" "You," he smiled. "Not my wife. You." She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "Maybe it's time I stop standing behind you," she said, "and start standing beside other women like me." He raised his glass. To the voice the world never saw coming. They toasted in silence, not to power, but to purpose. Chapter 8. The Empty Chair. 3 months later, at the Global Women's Summit, the ballroom held over 2,000 people. As Amina took the stage, cameras flashed. But she wasn't nervous. She wore a simple white dress, the same scarf she'd worn in the dealership that day. Behind her, a single empty chair had been placed on purpose. "For every woman still waiting for someone to believe in her," she began, "this seat is yours." She spoke for exactly 12 minutes. When she finished, the applause was deafening, but her eyes went straight to the front row, where Tariq stood, clapping with tears in his eyes. On their anniversary, Tariq blindfolded her and drove deep into the outskirts of the city. "Where are we going?" Amina laughed. "You'll see." When they stopped, she removed the blindfold and gasped. It was a new foundation. Her name on the stone entrance. The Amina Diouf Center for Girls' Education, built on land he had bought in her home village in Senegal. She turned to him, overwhelmed. I wanted to give you something that couldn't be stolen, he said. She embraced him tightly. You already did, she whispered. You gave me back to myself.